Welcome to the first post-2019 Indy 500 video on my channel. And first, I'd like to just say thank you all so much, every one of you who stopped me throughout the month of May in Indianapolis to thank me or give me some constructive criticism or just to say hi. That was really humbling and really amazing, and it certainly gives me motivation to keep knocking these videos out of the park for you guys. So, today we are going to be talking about, after just a fantastic, exciting, so many storylines from the month of May in Indianapolis to Detroit. Oh boy, the duel in Detroit. And boy, oh boy, did the duel in Detroit get off to a good start. In fact, such a good start that we're going to need to bump this hat. And it's unfortunately a Puma hat video. We will talk about the race, but I think a lot of people are going to want to talk about how this race was run. And I feel like we're always talking about, when IndyCar races in the rain, procedural issues, whether those be the ones with when the race starts or how the race is run or when cautions are thrown and when they're not thrown. And it feels like we always have this conversation. And in fact, I think the last time that we really had this conversation was Barber last year, where, I posed the question, look, if you can't race in the rain, you can't do it safely, why do it at all? Or if you determine that racing in the rain is unsafe for one reason or the other, just don't do it. Just as soon as you see rain, just call it off and stop it. Now, we did have a pretty fantastic IndyCar Grand Prix at Indianapolis that was run in the rain, but thankfully it didn't rain at the start of the race, and that may have been the reason it was saved, that we actually had a rain race that wasn't a gigantic cluster. Now, I do want to say that there were some things that were out of IndyCar or NBC's control on this one. First of all, you can't control the weather, so you can't control when it rains or when it doesn't. I totally understand that that's always a possibility. So you may have to delay a race. That's fine. That's not a problem. You also, at least on the IndyCar side of things, you can't really control TV windows. That's an NBC thing. So if NBC values the 6 o'clock news more than they do the final laps of the Detroit race, unfortunately, that's the situation. Am I totally gung-ho for NBC on that one? No. But at the same time, I understand that portion of it. The part that I don't understand, and the thing that I'm still scratching my head on, is that IndyCar announced this race as a timed race, which was pretty predictable given the fact that it's on network TV. The race had already been delayed like an hour and a half, somewhere around there. You're not going to get the whole race in on the network TV. Okay, understandable. You want to shorten it so the race gets on network TV. The winner is shown on network TV. Oh, wait. They decided to go with a 75-minute time limit, which put them well past the 6 o'clock deadline, which I would assume was known and agreed upon by both parties well in advance of this race. So why then was there a 75-minute time limit placed on this race when it was going to get bumped to CNBC anyway for the final 20 minutes? And considering the race didn't even run to half distance, why wasn't the race completed on CNBC if you had time on CNBC? I mean, unless you really think Undercover Boss is super important to show, I don't really get pushing it. Well, I understand if you had done a time limit, I guess it was 20 minutes too long. So if you'd done a time limit of 55 minutes, under an hour of racing, and gone with that, you could have gotten the race in on network. I at least would have understood that. It wouldn't have been the best solution, but doing what seemed to be an arbitrary number of 75 minutes. Now, there possibly is some IndyCar rule out there, I'm not ruling that out, that for every lap, maybe they go to a minute, so it went from a 75-lap race to a 75-minute race, and it just so happened that they couldn't get it all in on the network. That seems like a weird rule. And in 75 minutes, like I said, I think they barely eclipsed the halfway mark. They might have not even gotten to the halfway mark because there were so many yellow flags, especially at the start of the race. There was a spin for Matheus Leist where Santino Ferrucci almost collected him, but that wasn't something that I would have thought should have brought out a yellow under even dry circumstances. And then you had Pato O'Ward and Takuma Sato get into each other. Unless they determined that Pato's car was dangerous for being slow or for whatever reason from getting into the wall. That's maybe the only thing I could think of. But I don't know why they needed to. I mean, it was a single file start anyway. It felt like it took them forever to get the race going, especially after they'd gotten the cars to pit lane. It just felt like it just dragged on and on and on and on. And this was something that I'm going to talk about later about the Indy 500, but during the red flag period in the Indy 500, this was kind of the same thing. Way too many laps under the yellow, or way too much time spent on things that aren't the race. And ultimately, it comes down to, were the customers at the race, the fans watching on TV, they deserve a full show. If at all possible, to give it to them. And I think I read somewhere that Detroit, the sunset was at 9:02 p.m. So you had an extra 3 hours there that you could have run the race to completion. Would it have been best for the teams? Would it have been best for the health of the competitors? No, probably not. Of course, I would question why you're running a doubleheader right after the biggest month of the year for IndyCar teams in the first place at a street circuit, but that's neither here nor there if that's really the concern. If, time or energy spent on a doubleheader, well, then you shouldn't promise a doubleheader. You should just run one race if that's all you think you can get in. Maybe they should have just canceled this race. Maybe they should have moved it to tomorrow morning. I don't know. I know that they had done doubleheaders before on the same day. I think Toronto 2014, they did 2 races in one day, which was definitely very interesting. I don't know if they would want to repeat that for many reasons. I'm sure you can think of them fatigue-wise. Or just run however long it would be. So 75 plus 75, that's 150 laps or whatever. Maybe do a 150-lap Detroit race. Does anyone want to see that? I don't know. But ultimately, it came down to the fact that this race became very predictable. It was a one-stop race, and I think from the majority of the competitors, that one stop occurred under a yellow. So in a lot of ways, it was kind of the whole NASCAR stage racing problem where the race was very predictable and, it benefited one guy and that was it. And that was the guy who won the race. So let's talk about a few more things that kind of came out of this first Detroit race, even in the limited amount of time that we actually saw green flag racing. So like I said, it was a single file start. Again, IndyCar was erring way on the side of caution on this in this race. Alexander Rossi was the pole sitter. He pulled away. Rossi has been on a tear recently, and it's really a shame that he had. If you think about it, he probably could have won every race except for the Indy GP in this season. Well, in the last few races. So Long Beach, Indy GP, Indy 500, and now Detroit 1. He could have won 3 out of the 4 of those races very easily. And this was another one where it looked like, well, he's going to run away with it. And again, the caution that was brought out right as everybody was kind of crossing over to the dry tires. It was actually Marco Andretti, of all people. In fact, I shouldn't say of all people. Marco Andretti is usually the guy who goes to the dry tires in wet conditions first, for whatever reason. And I guess we know Brian Herta is the guy who's always this Mr. Strategy. He's always trying something to get his guy out front. So I guess Marco was the guinea pig this time. It did make for some great TV, some exciting TV to watch Marco fight with the wheel as the car was just slipping and sliding around. But I don't think it did Marco all that good. When the caution actually did come out, unfortunately, he got caught out by it. And for whatever reason, I shouldn't say for whatever reason because it's actually probably the way it should be, but IndyCar opened the pits very quickly so that everybody could come in. but it kind of screwed over the guys like Marco and Santino Ferrucci, who came in under green flag conditions, and as they were trying to pack up, the guys like Rossi and Dixon and the like all came in and came out ahead of them, which, again, I wish that was the rule all the time because it's a little bit more legitimate. You don't have kind of the guys being able to leapfrog 10, 20 positions just because they pitted earlier than everybody else. But it's weird to see them call it in this race, especially when usually IndyCar's policy on yellow flags is hurry up and wait. It just seems like their yellows take so long. I really wish they'd shorten the yellows quite a bit. Speaking of yellows, Scott Dixon in the tire barrier. Wow. His first crash DNF of any kind since Texas of 2017, and that wreck wasn't even his fault. That was Takuma Sato's. Then you go back to Indy 2017, another one of his more recent DNFs, another crash, another one that wasn't his fault. So I can't even remember the last time Dixon crashed on his own, unassisted, just clipped the inside wall and speared off into the tires and ended his day. Really surprising. And, we kind of talked last year about Rossi throwing the championship away at Detroit. That may be Scott Dixon's championship going up in smoke. Another driver I want to talk about is Takuma Sato, who is maybe having the best season of his career at the age of 42. And I honestly believe that Sato may be a genuine, legitimate, and any other synonym of that, championship contender. And this is unbelievable, but it's true. He scored the double points at Indy, finishing third. That vaulted him up into the championship. He obviously had to win at Barber. And he comes here, and in the first race of Detroit, he's third. And he's driving as well as I've ever seen Takuma Sato drive. So, assuming he keeps this form up, we know how good he is on the natural terrain road courses, and several of those races finish off the season. Then consider Pocono. That's a race that you would think he could win. And like Indianapolis, last year, Takuma Sato was taken out very early. Same ditto for Pocono, because he was involved in the Robert Wickens crash. So really, Takuma Sato and Rahal Letterman Lanigan on the super speedways, that could be another race that Takuma Sato could win. Add in the natural terrain road courses, and we still haven't seen any short oval racing this year, so we really don't know what Takuma Sato can do on those. There's a again, I'm going to say it. This will be the hot takes. Takuma Sato could be mathematically eligible by the time we get to Laguna Seca for the championship. But the two guys ahead of him in this race are probably the two guys that are going to be the ones racing for the championship. That being Alexander Rossi and Joseph Newgarden. Now, Newgarden certainly benefited from some strategy to get up there, but once he was up there, he held the lead. One of the most interesting things, I think, from this race that a lot of people kind of picked up on was the fact that Tim Cindric was kind of coaching Joseph Newgarden through, telling him when Rossi was using push to pass versus when he was off of it, so Newgarden could respond and not get passed. And he just drove a brilliant race. Again, it was shortened. I would have liked to have seen another pit stop sequence, maybe some of the drivers going to red tires at some point. But he held off Rossi, and once again, we see Alexander Rossi, the bridesmaid this season, rather than the bride. You got to think, if Rossi could catch a break, he would be running away with this championship right now, but that's not the case. Joseph Newgarden is the leader. And I think I mentioned it a couple races ago that Joseph Newgarden is another driver who is driving just as well as he could. Even races where he didn't necessarily have the best car, like Indianapolis, he was right up at the front. So and scoring good points, and that's what you need to do. So obviously, now that we're past the Indy 500, the championship is going to become the major concern, and that seems to be the thing that is really starting to heat up. And all of the drivers who look to be the championship contenders are now running up at the front of most of all of the races. So that makes it very easy to follow as a fan. So unfortunately, through some circumstances, this wasn't the most enjoyable race to watch. I wish it would have been better. Hopefully tomorrow's race will be better. But let me know what you thought down in the comments. What do you think about NBC, IndyCar? Who's to blame for the shortened race? Again, I think it's IndyCar. I think they were aware of what NBC and their expectations were. And, well, the late start didn't help either, but there was an IMSA race earlier that I'm guessing couldn't have been moved. And if it could have been, they would have had to jumble all sorts of TV schedules. I don't know. So let me know down in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been David Land on YouTube, and we'll see you tomorrow to talk about Detroit race number 2.